everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rugby with Pads. You might not be listening to this in the morning, but we're recording this on Monday morning because we are striving to be the first guys to get you out your special waivers for week 9. We might be the only show doing that. I don't know. I haven't done my research well enough, but for now, I'm staking a claim that we are incredibly early, and that's the benefit of being this side of the pond. Before we get into waivers and reactions to this week, quick shout out to all the socials and the way you can follow and support us at Rugby with Pads on all the socials. You can get a membership where we do a full in-depth email. I guess it's a newsletter for both waivers and start sits as well. I've previewed it on my Twitter, so go and have a look at that, or X at Rugby with Pads. You can get a membership and you can get some merch, which I'm not wearing today, unfortunately, but you can also get merch from our Etsy store, store.rugbywithpads.com. That's the sales pitch. Let's get into week 8 reactions. A lot happened, and I was very angry because not a lot happened in the way I wanted it to, but let's focus on the positives. And we'll start from the top with some big plays here. I think it's worthwhile calling out the number 1 fantasy player of this week. CD Lamb was allowed to cook at last. 41 points, 158 yards on 12 receptions for 2 TDs. That is a monster stat line. That is Tyreek level, and he became the fantasy number 1 player for week 8. If you had him, you probably won your matchup. If you had him in DFS, you definitely won your matchup. I think we've proven this week as well, sticking to the NFC East, Sam Howell is a baller, QB1 of the week, whilst losing. Going up against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles defense, incredible performance. I think, in some formats, nearly 40 points. Very, very good player. Sticking to QBs, we've got Joey B returning to form, and he beat the 49ers on a tough week. I think the Bengals DNA runs entirely through Joe Burrow, and he even made the running game relevant, both Mixon and Evans being relevant to this week's fantasy performance. Mixon with 20 dancing in the end zone, and Evans with a solid 13 as well. In more QB news, Will Levis might be legit, through the power of God and Mayo and unpeeled bananas. He brought D-Hop back from the dead and had a solid fantasy performance, and he should probably be, if he's not already, I might just have a quick look on here. He should definitely be in your considerations for waivers this week. If he is legit, I think I've got a couple of people ahead of him, but you know what? I might throw him in there just for fun. I'm just going to check that out on the other screen now. Elsewhere, the Packers still suck. The Jordan Love experiment, I think, is over. I really do. Nothing in that game. I need to go back and look at the long form, but nothing in that game brought me any joy. And nothing Jordan Love has been doing brings me any joy at all either. He's just bringing down everyone else, and I think it's maybe more of a coaching thing than anything else. There's just no good fancy assets. I'd sell if you can, sell on name value. Maybe that's a reaction that's a bit too close to home for some, but anyway. On the other side, instead of Jordan Love, you should be playing Josh Dobbs. He continued to impress in a close loss to the Ravens. Fancy wise, he outperformed Lamar, which was Lamar was one of my pickups and starts of the week. I was wrong there, but he was continuing to impress, play beyond his means, and maybe there's a question the Cardinals need to ask themselves: do they trade away Kyler Murray to a team who is now quarterback needy? And there are plenty of teams who are quarterback needy. There were so many injuries. Cousins likely out for the season. There were more benchings. Ridder was benched. I think Pickett was injured, but because I saw some Trubisky in there, I need to go back and look at these things. But Pickett, Tyrod Taylor, all making way for backups and various other players to come into their stead. There's a lot. I think the QB market could be interesting in the next couple of days for trades, and we will have a look at trades, the impact of trades afterwards next week as well. Sticking to that game, though, that we had in Arizona, Gus Bus scored 30 points, and he was probably on your waivers. I've been saying to this all the time, get him. He's still 45% available. He is the number 1 back out there, and I think Lamar likes playing with him. It sounds like it, and he's willing to give up touches on the ground to him as well. Zach Moss outscores Jonathan Taylor once again, thanks to mainly a TD, but I still think Taylor proved he was the better back, and I think we'll see him worked in more, but it is definitely a committee there. Even though he's been paid 40-odd million to be in a committee. We'll have to see how that comes out. Elsewhere in committee world, Charbonnet outperformed Kenneth Walker this week. First time we've seen it. First time we've seen him hit the ground running, literally, and have a set of downs and a set of Yeah, they had a set of drives where Charbonnet was the main guy, and I thought he looked really impressive. He is a big bruising back. We like that a lot. Could we see him getting worked in more? I think this spells what we thought at the start of the season for Kenneth Walker, that it will be more of a committee. Zonta Foreman came back to earth, and I think in kind of also rubbish running back news, Dameon Pierce continues to disappoint on what we thought was going to be a further breakout for him this season. But there is positive news elsewhere, and I think it's becoming more of a passing league. Well, everyone says that it's always been a passing league, but wide receivers are dominating in this. And if you look back, and I'll pin it somewhere, if you look back at our redraft of a mid-season redraft, instead of it being running back, because if you went running back, you're probably disappointed because you probably got someone like Nick Chubb and Mixon in the mix. I don't know. If you went that, you're probably disappointed. If you went wide receiver, you're sitting pretty right now. And that's thanks to guys coming out of the woodworks and really performing. Rashid Shaheed is that guy in New Orleans. He's the number one receiver there, I think. Surpassed Chris Olave and Michael Thomas in the last few weeks. Gabe Davis. Why? Why are you doing this to me? 23 points on my bench. Very annoyed about that. Jamison Crowder turns back the years with a decent performance as well. I don't even know where he came from. Teams are just throwing it more. And because of that, because there are more shootout games, especially this week, there were some really interesting games that were very high scoring. You saw a lot of points in the air. But tight ends still suck. There are a few bright spots, though. Trey McBride, 25 points. Now the guy in Arizona. Sell all your stocks of Zach Ertz. Yeah, he's injured, but I don't think he's coming back to anything decent. And I think they've found something in Trey McBride. Kittle had his boom game after his bust games a few weeks ago. It did come in a loss, yes, but he did it. Taysom Hill won't go away on the goal line, which scuppers any huge games for Kamara owners as well. And annoyingly, Gerald Everett was replaced last minute by Donald Parham. I chose to play Everett. I was asleep, because of course I was. And Parham impresses in the end zone once again. Waller as well, after having such high hopes at the start of the season and having a great game last week. Loads of people played him at 1.4 points, injured. I think his season may be cooked. But that was this last week. Just finished. Let's look at the week ahead, and there are a lot of people out. After not having any buys in week 8, we have a lot of buys this week. We've got 4 teams on a buy. We've got Denver, Lions, San Francisco, and the Jags as well. For Denver, you know what? They may be more relevant. The Denver defense did their thing against Kansas City. I think they broke a 16 or 17 game losing streak against them, 13 in the Mahomes era. But I think Javonte Williams struck out as being a really okay fancy asset again. We'll see if he is continued to be using that. They're still using Jaleel McLaughlin. They're still using what's his name, Samaje P. Ryan on passing downs. Sutton is probably the number one, but I think we could see him traded. Anyway, if you have those guys and you're using them, you might need a replacement. The Lions is probably a more problematic place because there are so many fancy assets there that you want to get rid of. Goff, Laporta, David Montgomery, when he comes back, obviously you're probably stashing him. Jahmyr Gibbs, who I'm hoping will have a monster game this week. I need him to outscore. What do I need? I need him to outscore Sam Laporta by 18 points. Probably a big ask for my dynasty lineup. And if you could just score 50, mate, just do that for me. That'd be nice. I'm on Rasen Brown, and more besides that. There's a whole cast of characters there. You've got Lions players, you're probably going to be suffering this week, and I have plenty of Lions players, so I'm not looking good going into week 9 there. San Francisco, they didn't have a great performance this week, but you're losing out on Purdy, Kittle, Debo, Ayuk, and CMC, big names there. And the Jags, Trevor Lawrence didn't have a great game, but you're losing him anyway. You've drafted him high. ETN, I think, is turning into a very nice RB1. Calvin Ridley, boom bust. Kirk, solid. Engram is a potential tight end one for a lot of people. So you're missing out on a lot of players. So who's going to come and replace them? Well, someone who I've already just mentioned very quickly, Trey McBride, 92% available, coming up against Cleveland, but he does get a few good games, including the Rams in week 12. I think that's a pickup if I were you. 92% available. That's a huge number. Rashid Shaheed, again, already mentioned him in the course of this show, so he performed well last week. So we're not scraping the bottom of the barrel here, guys. We're finding fancy relevant players in the waivers. Rashid Shaheed, number 1 in New Orleans, 82%. He's got Chicago, Minnesota coming up. He's probably my number 1 pickup this week, but we'll see when we come through here. Jamison Crowder, he's made the list because I was just surprised where he came from, but he has New England, Seahawks, and New York Giants in the next few weeks, potentially soft matchups. And if you want to attach yourself to Sam Howell, who is not making the list this week, no, he is making the list this week. Actually, I'm going to pair him with Sam Howell. Sam Howell still 70% available. If you need a big turnaround because you've got 2 Lions players, you've got Goff and a wide receiver, Sam Howell and Crowder could be an interesting pair for you. Zach Charbonnet, again, another player who I've mentioned who came out, maybe starting to be worked through, might be a bit of a stash. He's got a tough couple of matchups that people will avoid him, so maybe you can pick him up in week 10. He's got Baltimore, but week 10 and 11 slate looks a bit more interesting and maybe see him worked in there. Chuba Hubbard, yeah, the Panthers got their first win. Maybe they're full with a bit of confidence. He's taking the snaps over Miles Sanders while he's a bit, kind of on the side there. Interesting play, 58% available. If you're struggling at running back, he's a reach a little bit. There wasn't that good pickings at running back this week. And finally, QB, we'll go with 2 names. We'll talk about Dobbs, who, again, we've already talked about. Again, these guys are fancy relevant. He's maybe got a lower ceiling than Sam Howell, but and he's got a tough matchup again this next week against Cleveland. But if you're stuffed, he's in there at 83%. And finally, we will talk about Mayo, Banana, Coffee, whatever he is, boy. We'll talk about Will Levis, who came out of the blocks firing, gunslinging. We've got his stats up here. They're not that impressive, but they're pretty impressive for a rookie here. 19 for 29, 65.5%, completion percentage, 4 TDs though. He was incredibly efficient in end zone play there. 238 yards, 7 carries for 11, so he can do a little bit on the ground. I wouldn't call him the most mobile. He's a gunslinger though. Yeah, I think he might be petered a little bit by the conservative play calling. He's got Pittsburgh next week, which is a tough matchup for any offense. But again, you're losing 3 decent quarterbacks this week, thanks to waivers, and he is 99% available in most 12-man PPR leagues. So that's your lot, guys. These are the guys you should be going and getting. Quarterback, you've got options in Will Levis, Dobbs and Howell. At wide receiver, Shaheed and Crowder seem like obvious choices. At running back, it's a bit thinner, Zach Charbonnet and Chuba Hubbard. And at tight end, if he's still available in your league, people aren't doing their business. 92% available, Trey McBride. Tough match for next week, but he's got a good set of matches coming up. And at tight end, you will want anyone to fill a hole. That's your lot, guys. A really, really short episode this week. I'm going to get back to it. I just wanted to get something out quickly to you guys, so I hope you appreciate that. As I said at the start, you can follow it all the ways. You can support the show, rugbywithpads.com. It's all there. All the designs I'll flash up on the screen as well if you're watching on YouTube. But thank you so much for listening. I will speak to you later on this week, I'm sure, once I've worked out what's happening in my league, because I've got, you know what, I'll do a bit of a league update for you guys so you can come along for the ride and see how we're doing. But thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all on the virtual gridiron.